Many of us prayed to the gambling gods that we would have another game, and a game 7, no less, to discuss. And they responded and answered and delivered. We have one for Sunday, and that's what we're going to be breaking down throughout this next show. And we have our resident Hoosier and Pacers fan, Wes Reynolds, in the house. I'm Doug Kezirian, and I guess it's only fitting that the Pacers won, Wes, on your birthday in a game 6 to extend the series to the two best words in all of sports, game 7.
Yeah, I guess I got my wish there yesterday on June 19th. So, look, great game, great atmosphere there. I wish I was there. I was there for games 3 and 4. Was not there last night. Maybe it was a good thing because that was probably, arguably game 3 too. Arguably the best that they had played all series, the Indiana Pacers, and I just thought they had the energy right away, and that's why I more like the first half than anything because. You knew that they were going to be desperate in the back against the wall, the cliches that go with that. And I felt like the Thunder, I don't want to say that they didn't try. I don't believe that that's true. But I don't think they were ready for the intensity of that moment. You could tell that this is still a very young team that's pretty green in these spots, in these situations, because veteran teams that have been there before are going to go out and grab that by the throat. And the Thunder did not. And you could tell early that it was the Pacers that were the aggressor, including Tyrese Halliburton, who was, I think, much more effective than anybody would have thought. And certainly the market was going to give him credit for. And then you could just tell it was the Pacers game. I know the Thunder got out 8-2 and they called the timeout. But all of a sudden, when the Pacers got in the flow of the game, the Thunder had absolutely no answers.
I'm all talk, Wes, because I said certain things before game results and then softened my stance. I said, I'm going to be playing the Pacers no matter what in game 6. This is a Thunder team that is young, as you mentioned. And by the way, if they win on Sunday, it's going to be the second youngest team ever to win an NBA championship in terms of average age, which would be 25.6 years old. So truly a young team, a young coach, and a team that's been an absolute disaster against the point spread on the road this entire postseason. They are now 1-9 ATS, and that lone cover was game 4, which was the grossest cover you could imagine. So they really should be 0-10, and they've split them straight up 5-5. So this is a team that definitely has question marks, but a much different team at home as well.
Yeah, no question about it. And I think kind of what we said a little bit, and I know we'll get into that with the prop discussion later, the role players on the road don't always travel. They travel in body, but they don't necessarily travel in production. And I think you saw that last night. And, when you're at home, Wiggins and Wallace and them guys, they can make them shots. But on the road, they were kind of invisible last night. And whereas I think the Pacers role players, especially Toppin and McConnell, they've been the two consistent ones. They've been consistent throughout the series, whether it's home or away. Look, there'll be little dips and little peaks and valleys here and there, but it's basically, kind of straight, steady Eddie with those two guys. And I think that's why you're seeing when we saw that the price came out, I think there were some 9s, but we'll call 8.5 the global opener. For the first time, I feel
I'd agree.
Yeah, for the first time, I feel this series, Doug, because we've seen some back and forth where it's like, okay, when it goes to 5.5, the Pacers as a home dog, they get some support, and then it goes to 5, and then you get some Thunder support. For the first time, I think in this series, we have some, not all, but some of the masses that believe the Pacers can actually win this thing. Finally. We haven't had that all series. And look, they're an underdog for a 7th straight game in this 7-game series. But finally, I feel like there's at least some belief out there that the Pacers can win this series because you have had one-way traffic from the opener all to the underdog here. There were the 9s, we'll call it 8.5, 7.5s. I'm even seeing a couple rogue 7s. Very few of those out there, by the way. But I saw a 7 on my line screen. I was like, whoa. People are really buying into the Pacers. So I don't know from a fan standpoint, I'm separating my fan from betterdom standpoint. I don't know if that's a good thing. It's like, I don't want everybody to get on this team's bandwagon right now. I still want that disrespect maybe to carry over another game.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I used the word last night, a tax. You have to pay a tax on the Pacers now because the market's not what it usually is. OKC home point spread, right? It's been 9.5. There was a tax in game 2 at 11 because it was 0-1 for the Thunder, and then game 5. So yeah, this one's much lower now. The point spread's lower, so the total slices of the pie are lower with a 215 neighborhood. So but yeah, to your point, Wes, it's definitely gotten some momentum on the Pacers side. And I was listening to a couple podcasts overnight and this morning, and you always pick up a nugget here and there. That stuff, we've been doing this forever. We're in our 40s, or we've been doing this a long time. I didn't really realize it until they said it. I was like, that's a good point. So typically, game sevens early in the playoffs, like early rounds, are blowouts for the most part. They're usually home team covers. But in the finals, it's usually a rock fight and the points matter. And they're much closer. Rarely do you get a game 7 blowout. We're only going to have the 8th in the history of the NBA finals. It's going to be the first since 2016, which was LeBron and the Cavs coming back 3-1 deficit to Golden State. And they won outright, but they were down, I think, 9 at half. So, but that is interesting and it makes sense because deeper in the playoffs, you have better teams in theory, although one conference could be certainly skewed. And you're going to have two teams that know each other really well. And I think that's what the betting odds reflect here. I mean, you have a low total, you have a lower spread because it's all hands on deck. And I really, really think, to your point, the Pacers played maybe their best game of the series, if not game 3. But I really think there's a huge advantage in coaching. And he knows how to push the buttons. And there's a youth factor here with OKC. And I heard it on another podcast, and I said, that's true. No matter how much you say, and guys like SGA were saying, we got, just because we're close, one win away doesn't mean we got it. We got to come in with our lunch pail, all this stuff. But they're still making preparations for the champagne and the nightclub. Do they fly to Miami after the game and all that stuff? And that has to seep in to a young team that's not really demonstrated an ability to go for the jugular or a professional maturity that teams that have won before do.
Yeah, yeah. Look, I think that there are 3 reasons why this line has moved to the Pacers. You're always going to get a little bit of movement. Number one, because of bettors betting what they see last. So the instantaneous reaction is going to be from the team that you just watched win and win pretty convincingly. It was 30 points after the third quarter, and then it was pretty much all garbage time because the Thunder didn't play the starters in the fourth. But I think 3 reasons. One, Tyrese Halliburton. And who knows what he's going to be like on Sunday, because we know that if this injury was in the regular season, this would probably be 7 to 10 days that he would be out.
It's crazy because he looked perfect in terms of a health. Like he wasn't limping, and he looked like typical Halliburton with the step back threes. He had 7 attempts, as you can see on the screen. I thought he looked, and then when he made that anticipatory steal, when the ball was going out of the bounds, and if you're watching on TV, it was like the bottom of the screen in the first half. And he saw that Dort was going to try to save it to his teammate near half court. And he ran to that spot and saved it, and then led the break to Siakam, I believe it was. And just that anticipation and not thinking, oh, I have an injury, I can't do that. Just reacting and being sort of seamless. I thought that was a great sign.
I did too, and then that was, of course, the dunk where Pascal gave J-Dub a little bit of a body bag there. He really did on that dunk near the end of the first half. But there were times he got in the passing lanes, and that's where Tyrese can be good defensively, is when he's getting in the passing lanes and getting those deflections, getting those steals. He's not a guy necessarily that's going to be a shutdown guy at the point of attack, that's going to, guard SGA at the point and, be able to contain him off the dribble. He doesn't do that. But I thought Tyrese's health, number one, the fact that he showed more effectiveness than anybody thought he would. Now, he's still not going to be 100% on Sunday night, but the fact that he showed he can produce and had 14 points and 5 assists, only had to play 22 minutes, by the way. So the fact they didn't have to play him in the fourth quarter, that was as good a scenario as I think the Pacers could have hoped. So that's one factor. Second factor, I think the Pacer bench has been more reliable. TJ McConnell and Obi Toppin. Again, Obi Toppin, if they gave him about a minute or two more clock, was going to be the leading scorer of that game. And I know you were
50 to 1.
yeah, you were
50 to
monitoring.
1.
Yeah, you were monitoring that because SGA had 21, Toppin had 20, and eventually they took Toppin out and went deep into the bench and pretty much cleared the bench on the Indiana side.
Oh, no, Wes, I misspoke. I edited my tweet. Toppin was in there at the very end, and he dribbled out.
Oh,
He could have
okay.
got a garbage time bucket. That's what I just assumed he was on the bench because I think it was a commercial or something. He actually played and dribbled out the last
That's
possession,
right.
and he was the one dribbling out.
They had to put him back in because James Johnson, who had that stat line of 2 minutes, 1 ejection, and 2 standing ovations last night for the enforcer, James Johnson. So that's why he had to go back in. But Toppin and McConnell have been very consistent in this series. Whereas Oklahoma City, you've seen a couple peak games out of Caruso. You obviously saw in Game 5, Wiggins and Wallace combined for 7 threes off the bench. Virtually nothing from them last night. You know, Caruso, last 2 games, by the way, 2 points and 0 points in game number 6. So the bench, I think, has been more reliable for the Pacers. So that was a second factor. And the third factor, I think, is Oklahoma City's youth. The fact that the Pacers have probably been a little bit mispriced throughout these entire playoffs. And Oklahoma City now has the pressure. You won 68 games. You're the youngest team on average, like you were mentioning, a little over 25 years old. And now they've got to hold serve at home. That's not to say that there's not any pressure on the Pacers. There's always a pressure when you're in a Game 7 because one team is going to end up being, we were 1 win away from that championship. And that hangs over you forever. But more pressure is on the Thunder. So that's why I think you're seeing this movement really toward that line here at 7.5, and it may even have a little bit more runway to get more Pacers action here.
I like the Pacers side. We'll get into all that. I first want to start with that point 1 that you made with Tyrese Halliburton's health. Like you said, Game 6 unfolded perfectly. You got him rest. I don't know if they injected him with something or whatnot, but he looked the part and played within himself, but played effectively, much more effectively than Game 5, right? No turnovers, things like that. That was plaguing, not to the same degree. What kind of, and it's interesting. So we see his points prop on the screen with 14.5 over -129. It was 13.5, kind of a giant unknown for Game 6. What do you expect in terms of how close to the version we saw in Game 6 that we do on Sunday in Game 7?
That's the $1 million question. And it's hard, I think, to really commit to one side or the other. But he did only play 22 minutes. And now he has 2 days where he could pretty much rest it and, still go through the walkthrough stuff, which he did before game number 6 anyway. But, it's just when he hits one of those early shots, Doug, I feel that's the key, that he has the confidence where it's like he feels like he's in his bag a little bit. Not that he was dominant by any stretch of the imagination, because they let Andrew Nembhard, which I thought that they were going to do, they let him initiate, I think, more of the action. And I thought Andrew Nembhard, that's kind of what's glossed over because Siakam, of course, had a double-double and then that monster dunk on J-Dub's head. And with Halliburton coming back and topping off the bench, and McConnell continues to be the spark plug. Had 9 rebounds, by the way, to go along with those 12 points. But Andrew Nembhard very quietly 17 points in game number 6 and had 4 assists, 3 steals. So they're confident with Nembhard initiating, and they were seemingly running Tyrese a little bit more off the ball and trying to get him in motion, despite the fact that that calf is not 100%. Tyrese is best when he's in motion, not when he's, just solely by himself initiating the offense. You got to give him on the move. And I think that that's what they were able to do. And by doing that early, they were able to get him in the flow of the game. And the fact that the Pacers did this too, without any production from Miles Turner. Miles Turner, 1 of 9, still continues to have a very uneven to borderline bad series for a guy that's up for the contract extension. Only had 3 points because I thought, man, they got to get Miles Turner going. He's got to hit a 3 early, really get the crowd in the game, get himself into the game. And to do that without his production, I think is really a feather in the Pacers' cap. So back to Tyrese, it's the road, game 7. It's a different animal here, but I would expect that probably not only gave him more confidence, but gave the team more confidence going in. Like, hey, we're going to be okay. we don't feel like we have to carry anybody. Everybody just does his job. Rather, I say his or her. I'm trying to be too PC here. His job. And
media professionals are trained a
I
certain way.
know that I'm a better, damn it. I'm not a media guy, but anywho, I think just taking the pressure off of him and taking the pressure off the guy, where every guy does his job. And that's the approach I think that they need to have going into game number 7.
I just think there's kind of more ways to win if you're the Pacers. I think the lineup flexibility and knowing more what your opponent can do and wants to do, I think is the advantage in Indiana. You just touched on it, how the Pacers can run their offense through Halliburton, through Nebhard, even Siakam a little bit. Now, the Thunder are deep, probably personnel-wise, just as many people deep. And their defense is their calling card if it's not SGA breaking things down and doing the silky smooth mid-range jumper and whatnot. But for the most part, Carlisle can throw different defenses at SGA, and I think he started to do that in game 5, if I remember correctly. And it sort of forces their hand a little bit, and they don't know what to do. And I think that's the advantage that Indiana has. And I think that segues to the question I was going to ask you. Thunder have been an absolute disaster on the road, completely wetting down their leg, seemingly every time they're on the road. But they've been outstanding at home. Which now, obviously, this game is at home, but it's a game 7, and it's the first time in this series they're facing elimination, and they only have faced elimination one other time, and that was their own game 7 against Denver. And they were, that was just, game 6, they had the lead and lost. So which version of OKC, given the stakes, given Carlisle, given everything, do we see? Do we see closer to the game 6 version, or do we see closer to the one that we've seen throughout this postseason in Oklahoma City?
I say closer to the game 5, you would think, because if you're the Pacers, you got to expect that the Thunder are going to be at least maybe not at their peak, but closer to peak. There could be some nerves early, but you would expect, okay, they're going to be a lot more comfortable at the Paycom Center at home. And it's the Pacers that I think the Pacers have gotten off to bad starts, by the way. Every game in this series now, including last night's result, the home team has been up at the half every single game. So, the Pacers, they've been getting behind a little bit too much in those first halves. Like when you're down a dozen, like if you're down, you mentioned about Cleveland when they were, Cleveland when they were down 9 to Golden State at half. That's where the Pacers, I feel like they have to be. They've got to be somewhere in the middle. They've got to be there where they're down 5 or 6, if they're down at all. You can't keep continuing to be down 12, 13, 14 at the half and expect that you're going to be able to pull the rabbit out of the hat, even though they did in game number 1. And in game number 5, they did cut it to 2 with 8.5 to go. And then all of a sudden they turned the ball over, and the Thunder, were off to the races and up 16 with 5.5 to go. So, Pacers got to take care of that basketball. And I think what you see with the offense too, be quick and decisive. Don't try to work for that perfect shot. Be quick and be decisive. And that's what I think that they did last night on their drives, on their shots, taking those threes in transition. When they're tough to beat, and they're tough to guard, and they're tough to defend. So I would expect you're going to see the Thunder play a little bit better at home. We'll see what that first half number, by the way, ends up being, because I'm seeing, some 5s and some 4.5s out there. If this gets to 4, just like if it gets to 7, I think, in terms of the full game side, you'll see some buyback on the Thunder over the weekend.
All right, let's roll up the sleeves and get into some point spreads here. I'm curious with this line. It's 7.5, 215.5 at Bet Rivers. Let's talk point spread here. Do you have a play on this?
Not yet. I'm kind of seeing where this goes. My initial read was to the Pacers, but I think the market really agreed. I was surprised to get that much market agreement on the Pacers. I thought you'd get a little discount. I thought it would go to 8.5, maybe to 8, because that always happens, about a half-point move or so on what you saw last. But I was surprised to see that down to 7.5 so quickly. I thought maybe there'd be gradual action toward the Pacers. That's what really surprised me, is that because I do feel, like I said, for the first time this series, you have some of the casuals and some of the masses thinking they can win this series because it's game 7. Quote unquote, anything can happen. Now, I don't, this game is obviously not quite a pick 'em like some certain national analysts and talking heads and broadcasters have said. It is 7.5. That's a relatively convincing favorite for game number 7, but it's not what it was. It's not 11.5 in game number 2 because everything has been bet accordingly, I think, for the most part, on the zigzag, which has been about a little less than 2/3 good ATS in the playoffs. No zigzag here. They're going back on the team that won the last game. So that's what kind of mildly surprised me a little bit.
That's a good point. The zigzag theory has been pretty dominant. Even that gross cover in game 4, that was the right side. Ultimately, certainly didn't feel like that. So I'm on Pacers. I'm close to pulling the trigger too. I agree with you. Usually the math guys shape the market, and the math guys have always been about OKC. But I think at some point the math changes, especially with an over/under going down to what it is at 215.5. Speaking of the over/under, game 7's always low scoring, and that's why the market is adjusted. Prior to this number, the lowest total for games 1 through 6 was 222. So that's a sizable adjustment. Now, the reasons game 7s typically go under, it's the 7th straight time you're facing the same offense, right? And there's only so many wrinkles they can put in. There's just a familiarity. Number 2, and this is probably the last of them all, but number 2, the stakes and the pressure maybe get to shooters, right? They kind of know what's going on, so they're maybe a little pull the string on a jump shot or something like that. I don't think that's that dramatic, but typically that's the narrative. But the other ones matter more, and it is measured possessions. I don't think, even though both teams like to get out and run and get easy hoops, and there's definitely some half court sets. I remember even watching in the first quarter yesterday and noticed it was, they would have probably pulled the trigger here on the, coming off, swung the ball, shot a 3 in the regular season. But there's just sort of that extra beat knowing that every possession matters so much. And then the final reason I think that's the most influential is the referees swallow the whistle. Typically, it's a much more physical game. They're going to let stuff go. They don't want ticky-tack stuff. So obviously, we don't know who the officials will be for the game just yet, but that's typically the sequence of reasons why we see such lower scoring games. And that's why I am officially on the under 215.5.
That'd be the way I would lean here too. I have not played it because you're obviously getting discounts here from games that have been 221 and 223 and 224, and now you got to go under 215.5. So I realize that's hard to do. So it's like, do you value the number more than you value the situation? The situation is absolutely dead nut under here. And that'd probably be the way I would look. We'll see if maybe a little bit. I'm waiting to see if a little bit of comeback on the over, where maybe I can get as much as I can. Every half point matters. If you could get 216.5, 217.5, or 217, something like that, I'd probably be in on the under. I think it's very telling. Just looking at the screen here, without I don't want to name names here, but some of the, I think, quote unquote square shops are high on the total at 216. And I don't want to read too much into that, but it's just something I notice. Some are at 216 and the rest of the market is at like 215.5. Maybe that's much ado about nothing, but those are little things I think you got to notice over time.
Yeah, but sometimes the sharp money is as sharp as a spoon. I mean,
Right.
especially when they're so
Sure.
math driven. And this Pacers team's been misread the entire postseason. So game 2, they did not cover, and they were close to covering like the worst spot imaginable. Game 4, they did not cover, and that was a pretty gross situation. Game 5, they could have easily covered. They were down 2 in the 4th, but did not. So, and then Matherin loses the ball on a wide open layup. So honestly, the Pacers could be sitting here having covered 5 of 6 games or so, maybe even all 6. So I think the market's just misread the Pacers, and I think the Thunder's got a inflated line from the regular season being just so different than the postseason. So I'm not that respectful of the market or the sharp money. Now, you always have to be acknowledged and stuff like that. Don't get too proud and too prideful, but I do think I'm not going to overreact to quote unquote sharp money. I think I mean, I know a lot of sharps who were laying the 5 when the market got there yesterday, and there's just no way I could do it. So I'm not going to pay attention to the total. I think it's sort of a crapshoot, to be honest. I mean, we really don't know in a game 7 how things are going to go. I know you can say that about any game, but I really think it's accentuated in a game 7 in terms of predictability. But I think it's going to be a rock fight. I don't think it'll be like 2010 Celtics Lakers, where first team to 70 is going to win. But I'd be surprised if both teams get over 100. I really will. I mean, yesterday was a blowout, and so you kind of throw that one out. I don't think we're going to blow out. So I can see this being like a 103-98 game kind of thing, and either team winning.
Yeah, I could too. And what I think I told some people after the game last night, the weirder this game gets, it favors the Pacers. I think down the stretch, so it's like, let's get weird here late, because I think the Pacers kind of thrive on more chaotic atmosphere. More chaotic games is what I'm saying about the atmosphere, not necessarily the fans or the crowd. But, when it gets weird late and you've got some of these like kind of busted possessions, if you will, I trust the Pacers more than I do the Thunder. I really do.
Totally.
I think the Thunder are going to get tight. And I think that you've seen that in some of these, whereas the Pacers, I think, just play a little bit more loose, because the Pacers, Doug, were in so many of these games in the regular season where they're in these wild-ass 138, 135 type of games. Whereas the Thunder, man, you're winning by 20 against the Pelicans all the freaking time. It's a lot different intensity when you're dealing with the situations the Pacers have dealt with rather than the situations that the Thunder have dealt with.
You want to get nuts? Let's get nuts. Channeling my Costanza. Let's talk about player props. And I'm a little bitter with the Holmgren over rebounds. Look, he was on his way. He had 6 boards in 24 minutes, and then it just got away. Now, I knew that there was a chance that they wouldn't show up and they'd fold like a cheap suit, but I was a little disappointed about the outcome of my 2 prop bets. Hartenstein, what do you know? He was bound to go over at some point. But, so lower over under means fewer points, i.e., right? Duh. So that means you're going to see some player props down a little bit. So SGA's 32.5 instead of 34.5. Jalen Williams 21.5 instead of 22.5 or 23.5. Things like that. I think Holmgren feels a little high at 15.5. We talked about the Halliburton adjustment from 13.5 to 14.5. Miles Turner playing well defensively, not necessarily there offensively of late. That would be a concern, although he did have a 10-point third quarter earlier in the series. What player props stand out to you? I mean, I'm inclined to play under on Holmgren and under on Turner, but that's just a lean for now. What about you?
Well, from an SGA standpoint, one that I did hit, because there was a couple props I didn't end up hitting last night, but one I did have was under 6.5 on the assist for SGA, just because the role players don't shoot as well on the road. And you saw that fall off with Wallace, and you saw that fall off with Wiggins, and hell, Jada, pretty much everybody else it fell off with. So now you have those assists down to 5.5, juice to the over. So I'm trying to debate, do I want to play that? Like, part of me wants to buy on the dip, but also it's like, you know what? This is game 7, and the MVP is going to take over and look for his offense first before everybody else. So I'm not totally sure how to do that. I'd probably lean the under rebounds on SGA at 5.5. Has gone under, I think, 8 of 12 at home in the playoffs, and under 5.5 and 5 of 6 in this series. So he's not really going to be concentrating on the boards, because the last thing you want him to do, I think, is pick up a foul on a loose ball or a loose rebound or something like that and get himself into trouble. So 5.5 with heavy juice. You could maybe play under 4.5 at plus money as well. But that'd be one that I would certainly be looking at. The chat, I don't know what to do. I need to just leave Chat alone, because I keep thinking that his jump shot's finally gonna fall, and it hasn't all series. So I don't know if I even want to really do anything necessarily with Chet on the Oklahoma City side. On the Pacers side, would probably be looking. Are we going to get some Obi Toppin regression after what we've seen? After what we've seen in Game 6, so maybe the under 3s at under 1.5, I think, could do that. He's been 9 of 11 under on the road in those postseason games for three. So that might be a way to look, because that's kind of like how I like to play these player props as you get deeper and deeper in the series, and as you get deeper and deeper now in the deepest point in the playoffs, game number 7 of the finals, where I do like to sell a little bit high and maybe buy low on some guys. So that's kind of where I'm going to be examining and kind of combing over with a fine tooth comb this weekend to find those spots.
Top and under 1.5 is -143 at Bet Rivers, and it wouldn't be a NBA Finals show without having an appearance from Shane in the comments section on the YouTube channel. I'm going to say it one more time: Pacers in all caps. Shane has been steady with the Indy support throughout this finals, and I love to see it because the Pacers have covered 3 games, should have covered maybe 5 if you really want to stretch it. And he's been taking them, I believe, on the money line. So good for him to be backing them, and they've certainly stood out. In terms of props, Adam Osimo, Jalen Williams over 1.5. First quarter rebounds you can do. The props hit 9 out of 10 games, and carrying back to the Western Conference Finals. Just a lot of opportunity there. I know Siakam's been sailing over his first quarter points. It was 4.5 for a few games, was 5.5 for yesterday, and it still got there with a strong surge of the back half of the first quarter. And don't forget, please subscribe, like. That's the cost of doing business on these free channels. That's our currency we ask, and get involved in the conversation. Join the conversation. What you want to see more of, less of. We're going to have a lot more WNBA talk the rest of the summer. We'll have summer league action when that gets going. We'll have NBA draft props. The NBA really never sleeps, but we'll also obviously have WNBA action throughout. So, Wes, it sounds like some early leans for you. I'm going to get involved here. I am going to play Holmgren under points. I do think 15.5 is a little rich for a guy that obviously looks for his shot and all that, but Hartenstein's maybe showing more initiative. And I think some of these guys, their bodies are breaking down. So I like over 9.5 rebounds too. And it's juicy, but I get it, because if the total's lower, that means more missed shots, fewer fouls. So Holmgren's going to have a lot more rebounding opportunities. And I've explained, if Hartenstein's starting, he's guarding Turner on the perimeter. Holmgren's more available closer to the rim. So I'm going to go back to the well with Holmgren over 9.5 rebounds. As long as Hartenstein's starting, I think there's going to be a lot of rebounding opportunities if we believe the total, and what all signs indicate is fewer makes.
Yeah, I could totally see that. How much are they going to split the minutes with Hartenstein and Holmgren? Now, last night probably not the best example to look at, because Hartenstein only went 16 and Holmgren went 24. So it's going to be more pronounced, because Caruso, it was kind of like the Josh Hart, Mitchell Robinson situation in the Knicks Pacers Eastern Conference Finals, where Robinson got the start, but Caruso got the starters minutes. You know what I'm saying? Like, where Robinson would play that whole first quarter and then would play through the 6-minute mark of the third, and then you wouldn't see him again, other than a random situation. And that's kind of what's happening with Hartenstein. But Chet, just to me, has been so erratic in this series. And he's somebody I have not been able to figure out, because all of a sudden he was starting to go under on the rebounds, then he started to feast kind of in the middle of the series. But the one thing that's been consistent, he has not shot the ball well. 2 of 9 last night, 0 of 3 from the 3. So I'm not just going to say, okay, here's the spot where he's finally, going to hit jump shots, because he hasn't really hit them consistently all series.
Well, what about the guys who have been steady and have been cash cows in the prop market? And that's TJ McConnell. Why aren't we playing him? Points and assists over, things like that. It's 9.5 points. I mean, he's been looking for a shot, the full jump shot from in the paint. You don't see that very often. The actual elevation, 2 hands on the ball, follow through from the paint. Usually it's one-handers or something like that. But McConnell's been fantastic. His assists, his rebounds. I think Carlisle went to him early yesterday in the first quarter. I think, you talk about role players and all this stuff. I think he's kind of the safest bet there is in a game 7, isn't he?
Well, now you're getting the tax here, because now it's 17.5 some spots, including at Bet Rivers, on the points, rebounds, and assists. So you are buying a little bit at the peak here, and that's not something that I usually like to do per se. So I don't want to necessarily buy at the peak here. And then also, you got to consider the fact that it's a game 7. Do we feel we're going to get more Halliburton minutes? We only got 22 last night, or closer to 23, and McConnell went 24. So those were a little bit heavier minutes than he usually gets. So are you now going to get to the point where Tyrese is healthy enough? He's certainly not 100%, where he's going to be back to a 30-minute guy. So that's what maybe gives me a little pause on jumping in so heavily on the McConnell props.
Yeah, it's never fun to be late to the party and sit there in a dud game and you're like, what was I thinking? But something to keep in mind. I was looking at his points plus assists kind of thing as well for McConnell, because he's been doing one or the other throughout the entire playoffs. It's not just this emergence here. He's just getting there early and really dominating. I think what's also really fascinating is the MVP market. And I give the odds makers at Bet Rivers a lot of credit because they have SGA's price higher than the money line of the game. So they have minus 335 for SGA and the Pacers money line minus 295. And I agree with it. I don't think anyone at all has a chance on OKC. I think it's absolute square money. Anyone trying to talk themselves into Jalen Williams, he's just had a minus 40 plus minus. SGA's been the head of the snake. He's the league MVP. He's been dropping 30 in all the wins. Like, there's just no one on OKC. I don't care if they have a 50-point triple-double. SGA is going to get the MVP. Now, is there a chance he wins it in a loss? I don't think so. I think someone for Indiana, because if LeBron didn't win it the year that they lost the first year, what was that, 2016?
Mm-hmm.
The first year that the Warriors won with Curry and the Splash Brothers, I don't think SGA, he hasn't been at that dominant to win from the losing team, Jerry West style. So I would say just stay away from SGA's MVP odds. Do you agree?
Yeah, I think at this point you probably would have to, because there's still two top possibilities for the Pacers. Siakam, I think,
So
is
that was my next point. So if
yeah,
you agree SGA, stay away. If you like SGA, might as well just bet the money line. Okay.
right.
Okay. Right. Okay. So let's get into the Pacers, because I think the Pacers are fascinating. You think it's only two-pronged. You don't think McConnell or Nebhard or anything like that, because you don't need majority. Okay. So there's 9 votes. You don't need 5. You just need to have more than anyone else. So if the Pacers win, it could go 4-3-2 or something like that, 3-3-3 or something, who knows, right? I think it's wide open. I thought Halliburton 30 or 1 or whatever it was. I think Halliburton plus 1050 is the bet I would make if I like the Pacers side, which I kind of do. So I think there's value there. I don't see Siakam getting it. I really don't. And then there's the McConnell component too.
Yeah, it would be Halliburton for me, because I think it's going to be him or Siakam, because Siakam got the East Finals. Remember that awkward moment where I think Tyrese kind of thought he was going to get it, and it was like, oh, okay, congratulations, bud. So maybe there's
Jaylen Brown won both last year.
yeah. So Siakam could, but I think especially if Halliburton has this heroic freaking game 7. Where he goes even above and beyond.
But look at the odds, Wes, because Siakam's plus 350 and Halliburton's plus 1050. I think they should be flip-flopped. I like what Siakam's done, and if you end up winning because of a great game 7, so be it. But I think the market is underestimating. Halliburton won game 1, okay?
Uh-huh.
He had a near triple-double in game 3. Everyone played well in 3, but he had a near triple-double. And then yesterday he was fantastic, although that was more of a Thunder loss because they didn't show up. So I think getting plus 1050 on Halliburton, who I think should be the favorite amongst the indie players, I'm stunned. I don't see Siakam. I think Halliburton's the narrative too. He's the point guard. He's the guy. I wouldn't be shocked if Siakam, if you had to vote going into this, if you're a Pacers, whatever, I wouldn't be shocked if Siakam won. But I think plus 1050 is way much value. That's like great value.
In a roundabout way, that's what I was trying to say, because
Sorry, yeah.
This is the MVP of the finals technically, but it's really the MVP of the playoffs. So they're not going to forget all that stuff that he did and all those game winners he had against Cleveland and against the Knicks and the Garden. And they're also not going to forget, a certain outlet that's been covering these NBA finals have been kind of crapping on him a little bit. Like, is he a superstar? Is he not a superstar? This whole inane and asinine debate. And, so a lot of guys, they, sometimes they'll vote like, yeah, okay, this guy was so wrong. We think that we're right, whoever the media pool is. So I agree. I think that it probably would go to Tyrese, especially if he guts it out. That's the storyline. That's the narrative. He gutted it out. And what if he does go for like high 20s in points in game number 7? It's possible. He could get on a heater from 3 a little bit, and hit 5-6 threes. And then all of a sudden you're right there. He gets a couple trips to the foul line, gets a couple drives, and he's at 25 points. So yeah, Halliburton would be the only one I would bet here. I'm not going to do McConnell. I just don't think it's been as consistent enough. Somebody may go that way. Now, there may be one of those 9 voters that go that way that likes to be a little bit different and go against the grain. But are you going to get a majority of voters to do that, though? And I just don't think
you don't need a majority. You don't need a majority.
Or even a plurality. Even a plurality. Yeah. Are you going to get that many? You'll get one that's kind of like the outlier here. But it's not like the Super Bowl where there's a lot more MVP voters. So that's why when you get a Larry Brown or a Dexter Jackson or somebody like that, instead of like the usual quarterback or receiver or star player, what have you. I don't think that works that way as much in NBA Finals voting.
All right, so I'm going to officially add a 0.1 unit on Halliburton plus 1050. So normal plays are half a unit. I'm going to do a 0.1 unit on Halliburton. I think that's too good a value on that front. Anything else, like top point scorer in the game? We laughed about it earlier with Toppin. Almost had a chance. Can anyone like Lou Dort go off? He's 50-1. I mean, if he makes 4 threes again.
Yeah, what is Tyrese's price? Because I think that's going to play a lot into potentially the MVP. What is his price?
22-1. He's 22-1. The problem is SGA is just a bucket, right?
Yeah.
And I think a game 7 might play to his strength because, yes, he's a free throw merchant, but he's also just a mid-range automatic. So if things are tight and everything, he can just get buckets and glide to the hoop.
Sure. And also, there were times last night where they were able to not get Dort on Halliburton. When Dort is on Halliburton, he I don't want to say disappears, but it's a lot harder for him to generate offense. And you saw last night, there were times he had Caruso on him. There were times he had other defenders on him, and he was able to get to the basket, was actually able to get to the foul line a couple times. So, but probably nothing for me on the top scorer. I think, going.
We all like a 50-1, 30-1, 20-1. It was our last sort of chance.
But those are lottery tickets. Let's be honest. Those are lottery tickets at this point. When you've got
Mather and Cash.
He did. And there's always those, but that's one of those things I'm always apprehensive about, Doug. And maybe I'm a little bit more traditional in my betting where it's like, okay, it cashed here, but the moment I get involved, I don't have a chance because I don't ever hit those lottery tickets.
No, I mean, I've hit a few. I think you got to find the weird situation where the math doesn't apply, like the Pacers coming home in game 3 where the Thunder could fold and they've been terrible on the road. Like the Thunder on the road is the times we should be doing it in every single game. Like that, looking back, of course, like that was sort of like their kryptonite, right? And that's something we should have taken advantage of it. And we talked about the ATS of OKC throughout the playoffs on the road, or in the series at least, but we should be taking it a step further in the derivative market and the domino effect of that. That's something we should have really sort of calculated. But now they're at home and it's a game 7, and these reserve players probably not going to play a ton. So I like your at least early look to a guy like Halliburton who's going to have increased minutes, and the variance of his injury may get you some value at that price.
There's one point you made there I do want to kind of add to a little bit. When you talked about the role players, these teams are here because they were the deepest teams and have had the deepest benches, in my opinion. Now that you get into a game number 7, how much do you rely? Look, Pacers are still going to play Toppin and McConnell, of course. The production has been there for them to play. But how much do you rely? Like, how deep do you really go? You saw like Isaiah Joe get clocked last night because it was a blowout, but he essentially got played out of the rotation. You've seen a little bit of Thomas Bryant for the Pacers get played out of the rotation. Matherin didn't get a lot of clock last night either in meaningful minutes. He only had 14 minutes. I thought he was going to have a big game actually last night. He showed up in the Canadian tuxedo on his birthday, and he had 2 points in 14 minutes, and a lot of those were the garbage minutes in the fourth where he played several minutes. So you're seeing some of these guys where I think, like, how much are they, even though he's been solid in his minutes, like how much are they going to give Kenrick Williams any real clock here for Oklahoma City? So I feel like you're going to see that rotation potentially, especially if the game is competitive, by I mean competitive within single digits either way. I just don't know how many of those bench minutes you're going to see, where you're going to see the usual 2 or 3, but you're going to see the starters play, I think, heavy minutes here. And then, of course, foul trouble is the great equalizer, but I'll be interested to see if Danielle and Carlisle, who have been very trustworthy of their benches, if they change in game number 7 or if they stick with their process.
On Carlisle, I trust. So whatever he says is gospel in my eyes. Real quick, check in on the W before we sign off here on this show. 3 games tonight. Nothing I love, but my initial sort of take is Storm -1.5 at the Aces. I think you got to continue to fade the Aces. And Asia Wilson's listed as questionable tonight. Still missed the last couple games with concussion or head injury, however they want to classify it. Storm, they're a bit of a roller coaster in my eyes. They can lose to any team, they can beat any team, but so can the Aces without Asia Wilson. So I think the Storm line looks cheap. And I like the over in the Mystics dream game, over 157. Mystics want to get out there and run, and 157 is just low. That's under 40 a quarter. And I know they just played each other, and the Mystics, I swear, like scored 25 points in the second half. It was so bad. They got blown out by like 30. Brittany Griner may not play. I think this dream coach wants to run. I think Atlanta's gone over their total in every road game. And I think the home games, their defense plays better. But I think the Mystics will be ready. I think they'll want to get up and down. This feels like an over game to me. But those are just leans I have on the slate tonight.
Yeah, that Mystics dream game of the 3 was the one that kind of leapt out to me. And I think we're a little bit surprised, and I guess because they beat him handily the previous game. But I'm surprised that the Dream are getting the move here up to 8.5 in some spots, because the Atlanta Dream. Well, it's not just necessarily the Griner status. It's just the fact that of the situation, they had the Liberty down 17 in Brooklyn on Tuesday. And if Atlanta would have won that game, by the way, they would be in the Commissioner's Cup final against Minnesota rather than the Indiana Fever. They blew a 17-point lead to the Liberty. And I know John Kell came back, but she did not play full minutes. She eventually left the game again. So, yeah, they're a championship pedigree team, the Liberty, and they have Stewie and they have Sabrina. But 17 on the road in the second half, you got to finish that off. And the Dream weren't able to do that. So is there a little bit of a hangover here is what I wonder.
That's interesting.
And I think that
so hangover potential, and maybe Griner's not playing and the line still went in favor of Atlanta.
Yeah. So maybe and it's juice to the favorite. And actually at Bet Rivers, and it put me down for this one actually, because I'm seeing 5 at Bet Rivers. For the first half, let's go Mystics first half +5. I think it's minus $1.17 on the VIG, I believe, at Bet Rivers. I think maybe that hangover's early, and that the Mystics hang in here, and plus the fact that the Mystics, did play this team and got kind of embarrassed on Sunday. It was 89-56, by the way, was the score, and that was at home. Now you go on the road. Mystics, by the way, did get a road win. A road win is a good win, even if it's against a bad team, and it was against Chicago, 79-72. And
to your point, Wes, and I'm going to interrupt because it strengthens your Mystics were terrible in the first half at Chicago, down double digits, and I had them in the first half on this show, but their coach changed the lineup. He started Shakira Austin, and they were completely out of sorts. Second half did not, or out of Austin, and they rip off a huge second half and win and cover the game line of -5.
Right.
So for your sake, I hope he's learned his lesson and doesn't start Austin all of a sudden randomly, and he goes back to the chemistry and the cohesion and doesn't dig yourself a hole because I think you're on the right side there at the first half as long as he doesn't start Austin.
Yeah, I think so too. Momentum of having a comeback like that. Sometimes that carries over to the next game, even though there's been a couple days off in between. And on the other side, momentum, I think against the Dream, it's like, man, we should have beaten the Liberty, because the Liberty, I know, have lost 2 games. Link's still undefeated, but the Dream, I think, maybe have some belief that, hey, we could be a really good team. We talked about it the other day on this show, that they could be a sleeper team on the futures market if you want to forego the 2 favorites with the Liberty and the Lynx. And we know that the Aces are having issues. The Aces are not the same team. And we had a text exchange about that last night, how they really miss Nikasi, who has done a great job with the Valkyries last night, with their great game plan against the Fever. Caitlin Clark had probably one of her roughest games of the season as the Valkyries get the outright win as an 11-point dog. So I think Mystics first half probably the way to go here, knowing that they just got blown out within the last week. Maybe they're going to have a little bit more energy early against the Dream.
Okay, so that's an official play for you. What are your official plays for Game 7?
Okay, let me.
So I'm on under 215.5 for a normal half unit. I'm on Halliburton MVP plus 1050 at 0.1 unit, so just a sliver. And then I'll split up my usual half unit, quarter unit each on Holmgren over rebounds, under points 15.5, and then 9.5 rebounds.
We don't have a first half yet up at Bet Rivers. I would like to maybe play the Pacers, even though the first half has been home team every single game. This could be the outlier, but Doug, let's go. Because I'm going to make these bets, but I haven't made them yet. And like the prop market, obviously not that mature, but let's go.
Current price. So you like anything?
SGA under 5.5 rebounds.
Okay.
And I want to give more, but I got to do some work on the weekend. Obi Toppin under 1.5 threes.
Okay. I like that one. That was juicy, but I liked it when I mentioned it earlier. So I like that move at all. All right, that'll do it. Good luck to you. Good luck to everyone. Obviously, it's been an exciting postseason, exciting run for this Indiana team. Truly historic. They have one more win to go. Can they get it done on the road? They have the right coach. They seemingly have the right makeup of a team. We'll see if the Baby Thunder can answer the call and actually deliver a title after being among the favorites, if not the favorite all season. So thanks to everyone. We will have a show on Monday. There's no W, but we'll still have a show and have one moving forward as well. So special thanks to Wes Reynolds. Good luck to you, our resident Pacers fan, and for everyone behind the scenes as well, directors, researchers, producers. So much work goes on behind the scenes for those that you don't see. I'm Doug Kezirian. Good luck this weekend. We'll see you back here on Monday.